Hello, buddy. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing an in-depth guide for a Glacial build in Teamfight Tactics for the beta. So the information we're going to be going over is going to be accurate as of the beta right now on July the 3rd, 2019. So if you're watching this in the future, some of it may have changed. So the numbers might be a little different, but I think some of the concepts that we talk about are going to be similar. So I think this will still be useful in the future. But just keep in mind that you might want to check up at on what the current stats are on these champions. And I might do another guide about Glacials in the future if there are some major chances. Or some other major changes, rather, I should say. Now, it is in the beta right now, so there's a pretty good chance that stuff is going to change over the next few months as they try to make the game more competitive. But I'm just trying to give you the most information that I can right off the bat. I have been playing a lot of TFT over the last week or so, but I will say that I did not play the beta very much, and I do not have experience with other things like Dota auto chess or some of those other auto chess genres. So I think the information's pretty good. But check out other people, take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't mean you're automatically going to win every game with this guide, but hopefully it gives you some good ideas to start to think about why Glacials can be so strong. And special thanks to Jeremy for sponsoring this guide as well. If you'd like to sponsor a guide yourself out there about any aspect of Teamfight Tactics or League of Legends or Total War Warhammer, I cover a lot of games on the channel. If you want me to do any specific content for you, just let me know. I'm happy to set that up for you. Usually it's about 30 minutes for an in-depth guide of your choice. I'll spend an hour or two researching the guide and then about an hour 30 minutes to an hour recording the guide, and then I have to publish it, upload it, all of that. So I think it's a pretty good bargain for how much effort I put into these. So if you'd like to sponsor the channel, if you like good, real, critical thinking, intellectual content out there, if you like the vibe of the channel, then just email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com, and I'm happy to set that up for you. Also, there will be timestamps in the description, and you can find access to this Google Doc as well if you want a little cheat sheet while you're playing yourself, just to try to remember what you should be doing at different points. I'll have that for you set up as well in the description, so you can always access that anytime. And if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. That's free. It's easy. It just takes a couple of clicks. Really helps out a ton. And come by, check out the stream as well. I have been streaming some Teamfight Tactics near the end of the stream, and if I have a dodge in the middle of the stream. So come by, check it out, see what's going on, especially once Ranked comes out. It'll be fun to see how far I can get in Ranked. So be sure to check that out next week. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so why Glacials? Why is this a good sort of build to go? Why should you think about this? A lot of people are sleeping on Glacials, I think, at least in the games that I see. Most people are going for the stuff that makes a lot of the all caps videos, right? They're going for kind of the Draven builds or the Assassin builds with Pyke right now. The Wild Dragons build, which we'll mention a little bit in here. Most people know that Glacials are really strong, but they just don't go for them. And I think a lot of that is because you can't rush a tier 3 with Glacials very easily. It takes a little bit more patience, a little bit more experience and money management to make it work. So I think it is really strong, but it just doesn't get quite as much press as some of the other builds out there. So I'm going to hopefully illuminate and enlighten you a little bit about the Glacials. It has been my go-to build, and it's been my most successful build by far, I think. So why is that? What's going on with them? Okay, so number one, stunning in this game is extremely powerful. And as we can see over here, that's what Glacials do. You have a chance to stun opponents for 2 seconds. For 20 seconds if you have, or for 20% chance to stun if you have 2 Glacials, 30% if you have 4 Glacials, and all the way up to 45% with 6 Glacials. Keep in mind, this is every auto attack by every single Glacial enemy. So it is totally possible, especially if you have 6 Glacials, to completely stun lock most of their team for most of the fights. You're going to have a 50% chance to hit, to stun every time you hit, and they're stunned for 2 seconds, and there's no diminishing returns in this game. So if you can stun them for 2 seconds and then stun them again for another 2 seconds before that 2 seconds is over, then they're going to be chain stunned. And especially if you combine this with the other CC most of these champions have. Lissandra can also stun the enemy, Ashe can stun the enemy, and Sejuani can stun the enemy, independent of this passive. So it's totally possible if you have a lot of Glacials that something like Ashe can stun somebody with her arrow, you can auto attack, stun somebody again for 2 seconds. Lissandra can ult them, stun them again. A couple more auto attacks, you land another stun, and then Sejuani ult triggers, that's another stun. A couple more auto attacks, that's another stun. So you see where I'm going? Like, it's totally possible to chain stun somebody for, like, almost permanently. with this build with a lot of people. So that's really powerful because there's no tenacity. There are no items that reduce the stun duration. There's stuff that will reduce like magic damage, which we'll talk about the itemization here in a little bit, but there's nothing that reduces stun damage, at least not to my knowledge, that's in the game yet. So they'll probably add that in the future, but for right now, it's not there. So no diminishing returns, no counterplay in terms of itemization, and it's really good offensively and defensively. Obviously, if they're stunned, they're not going to be able to hit you back, right? So that means that they're not able to use their abilities. They're not able to use their auto attacks. They're not generating mana for them to be able to use their ultimates. So they can have, their tier 3 totally decked out Vayne with 3 Gensus or something on the back line. But if you chain stun her, it doesn't matter what, what her items are or what level she is. She's still going to die. So that's really strong because it's not only offense, but it's also really good defense because it stops them from moving, stops them from generating mana, hitting you with things. So it's just really, really OP. Like, stunning is so strong in this game. And it's very good against big monsters, too. I mean, I've had some games go down to where you fight, like, an Elder Dragon at the end. And it is really, really hard to beat that thing with most normal comps. And normal Dragon, too, with some comps can actually be pretty hard. You can actually lose to the Dragon. Because he does a lot of AoE damage. But with the Glacials, it's easy to beat those things because you're just going to chain stun them the whole time, right? It's basically guaranteed that you're going to be either one of them because they're not immune to stuns. So if the game does go really long, then you do have a chance of potentially winning and fighting and, beating the Elder Dragon when the other comp that you're facing might not at the very end. So that's another perk of it. Okay, what else is good about Glacials? Well, it has a very versatile build path, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth here in a second, but has a 2-4-6 structure, which is awesome, which means that early game you can actually, or I guess kind of in the mid game, there is no tier 1 Glacial, so it's important to mention that, and we'll talk about that more in a second. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of that? But you can just kind of splash them in with a couple of builds too. You could be going Rangers and just, you'll have an Ashe in there. You can just throw in an extra Sejuani. You could go Rangers and try to go Elementalists and just throw in, like a Lysandra in there with a cannon. You can go Yordles with like cannon or something like that and try to throw in like a Lysandra and a Brand. So, there are lots of different things that you can do with this build. Volibear, if you're doing something with Brawlers, like maybe you've got Void Brawlers or something, you got a Cho'Gath, you want to throw in a Volibear, and then you find out, oh, there's a Sejuani. That'll work really well with this Knight that I have, whether it's a Garen or whether, you're going Yordles once again. You've got Poppy or something. You want to throw a Sejuani in there too. There's just lots of ways to splash Glacials into a lot of builds. And so you can do it at 2, you can do it at 4, or you can go all out and do it at 6. So I think it's the only trait in one of them. Demons also has that structure. But that's one of the best traits out there because it has really good late game scaling if you want it, but you can also try to get it in the early to mid game, and you can also splash. And it's good at all levels, right? Every Glacial, even if you have 3 Glacials, it's not a total waste because each one of them is still going to have a 20% chance to stun. Or if you have 5 Glacials, let's say you have 4 normally, but you've got 2 level 2 Volibears or something, and you want to throw those in there, you can do that. So it works really well even on the odd numbers, whereas some of these builds aren't going to be as strong if you have extra stuff. Like Imperials is really good at like 2 and 4, but if you have 3 Imperials, then it's just kind of awkward because you're not able, because only one person is going to benefit from it. Or like Nobles, for example. You have 3 Nobles, it's good. One random ally gets stuff, but you get no extra bonus if you have 4 or 5 Nobles. Right? You get no extra bonus with Phantoms if you have 3. It works great with 2, but not with 3. Pirates, you don't get any extra bonus for 4. You get nothing if you have 2. You have to have pretty much exactly 3 is what you want. Ninjas, same thing. You want 1 ninja or 4 ninjas. In between, it sucks. So it's just very modular. There are a lot of different Void, same thing. You have to have 3. Yordles, same thing. Either 3 or 6. So it's just very modular. It's one of the most flexible builds in the whole game. And it's easy to combine for like different bonuses too because they have great secondaries. Like there are very few Glacials where you're like, man, that guy kind of sucks. The only one I can think of is really Braum. It's not that great. His ultimate doesn't do damage. It's very timing reliant, and in a game that's like you don't control, it's very hard to time that correctly because you just don't know how the enemy's going to position. So yeah, if you put your shield up and you block something huge, right? You block like an Aurelian Soul ult, or you block a Brand ult or something with your Braum. Yeah, that feels awesome, but it feels pretty terrible when the Brand ults right before you shield, does all the damage, then you shield and block nothing. So it's just kind of awkward with him. He does combine well with Leona later on if you want to throw those two in there, if you're against like a very heavy physical damage build. So if the enemy's relying really heavily on like a Draven, or they're doing like gunslingers or rangers or something like that, he can fit in there, he can work, but I think he is one of the weaker links there, just because his stats aren't that good. He takes forever to kind of get online, and it's just really a little too inconsistent, I think, his ult. But everyone else is really solid. I mean, Lissandra's great. She allows you to go for the elementals, which we'll talk about in a second. She's pretty good on her own. She's got a good blend of offense and defense. She can chain CC, does AoE damage to other people, but then she can also defend herself. If, there's like an assassin diving the backline, she can freeze herself to buy time and do some extra damage. She's really solid. Like, Sejuani's really good, has a great ultimate. You can sub her in if you were going Knights early. So if you're going like a Darius Garen early game combo and you want to transition over and throw in a Sejuani to get like your 4th Glacial, that can work out really well. Anivia is also an Elementalist. She's kind of rare. You don't see her a lot, but she's Elementalist Glacial, lots of CC. She's solid. Ashe is really good, can slot in with Varus really easily in like a Ranger comp while you're waiting on the rest of your Glacials. Even Volibear. A lot of people think Volibear is not that good. He's all right. I mean, he's a tanky frontline. He's got a pretty good chunk of health, and he's got the brawler buffs. You can throw him in there with a Warwick if you're going, kind of a Wilds build early, or you can slot him in with the Cho'Gath later. So there are several things he can do, and he actually puts out pretty good AoE physical damage later on, which is great if they're trying to stack a bunch of magic resist on their team. If they have a bunch of dragons or something, they got a couple of Shyvanas and an Aurelian Soul, or maybe they invest in a couple of like those Negatron Claws or something. He's a pretty good AoE physical damage option out there, which you don't need that most of the time, but it can be handy sometimes. Mostly you're getting him just because he's a big body and applies Glacial and has the brawler buff. But yeah, so it works. It plays really nice with other bonuses. There are a lot of different ways you can go with this build. You have a plan B, C, and D with this build, just in case you don't get the brand, or just in case you don't get, Anivia for the 6 Glacials or something like that. There are lots of other things you can do, which I think is one of the really powerful points of this build, is that you don't have to fully commit to it at any point. You can kind of veer off if you're not finding some of your key pieces, which means you don't have to reroll a lot, which we'll talk about later, but that's going to allow you to power level up to have a better chance to get some of these higher tier pieces like the brand, like the Anivia, in the mid to late game. So yeah, most of the key pieces, so speaking of that, most of these key pieces are tier 2, 3, and 4. So that means that it's great for saving and power leveling early and loss streaking early on if you're comfortable with that, which we'll talk about the benefits of that here in just a second. But it's really great for that because it's okay if you miss out on the tier 1s. You don't have to reroll for them because there are no key tier 1s. Most of the stuff is tier 2 and tier 3. A lot of it's tier 3. If you're thinking about your Ashe, your Volibear, are going to be tier 3, and then Sejuani's 4 and Lissandra is 2. Your other key pieces are Kennen at tier 3 and Brand at tier 4. So lots of tier 2 or tier 3 and tier 4 stuff with a sprinkle of tier 2. So you can just power right up, right past your early levels, not worry about missing out on those tier 1 units. You're also not competing with a lot of other people who are trying to get to those level 3 Kha'Zixes, level 3, Warwicks, Nidalees, Garens, Dariuses, stuff like that. So you don't have to fight other people for that, which means you can save a lot of money and get to a higher experience faster. It also allows for a really versatile opener, so you don't have to have like these powerhouse tier 1 builds that you're going to keep for the entire game, right? You don't have to stack all of your items on like an early game Garen or an early game, Warwick or something like that, because you intend to keep them around forever. If the rolls just aren't going your way and you don't get a tier 2, early game unit, that's fine. It's not a big deal. And you can get a bunch of different openers. You can go Knights with Garen Darius, and that's fine early on. Really good powerhouse build. You can transition later into something like a Sejuani with either one of them. It gives you an option to go for something like a Darius in the mid game if you just need that little bit of extra power to stop the bleeding. If you're getting run over and getting low on HP, that's an option for you. Wild is also a decent option, so you can go like Nidalee with some Warwicks if you want to, and that transitions decently well. You can pick up a Volibear later to go with the Warwick. Wild in general is just really strong, gives you nice attack speed, pretty good tanking. Nidalee and Warwick are very strong by themselves, so it's a pretty good thing early on. And then Rangers is another option. If you get an early Ash, you can throw a Varus with that, and that's a pretty good frontliner. So it's just very modular. You know, you could have 2 Knights, you could have the Darius, Garen early, and then throw on like an Ash Varus and start transitioning until, later on if you want to do that. Or you can get like 2 Knights, you can get like a Braum and a Darius and put them together with Wilds, throw in like a Nidalee and a Warwick. So there's just all kinds of different ways you can fit these pieces together early because you're not forced into getting like very specific tier 1 and lots of tier 2 units for your build to work out, right? Like a lot of these other builds, you're going to have to do that. So, for example, one of the other most popular builds is Wilds, right? And so you really need high-level Nidalees and high-level Warwicks. You're going to keep them forever. You need to be able to find Ahri early on, or you're going to be in trouble. And then you are desperately dependent on getting a Gnar at tier 4. The entire build falls apart. So, you know, if other people are all trying to get the Warwicks, it can be tough to level up your Warwick. Or if you're just not finding an Ahri, that can be really awkward as well, right? Especially when you're power leveling, you know. It's really awkward when, you know, we'll talk about the probabilities here in a second, but when you just need that, like, maybe 2 extra tier 1 Nidalees to get to tier 3, or like 2 more Warwicks to get to tier 3, and you're faced with this decision, okay, do I level up right now in order to like have a better chance of getting that Gnar, or do I just stay at kind of a lower level for a couple more turns and just hope that I get a Nidalee? And then you're kind of up against the clock. You're like, man, I've only got 1 more level, then I'm gonna, or like 1 more turn, then I'm gonna level up, and it's gonna be hard to get Nidalee, so I'm gonna have to reroll like 3 times to get her right now. So I can just put you in some really awkward positions with a lot of the other builds. Nobles is kind of the same thing. You need some early game champs. You need your Garens, your Fioras, your Vaynes. Like, if you want to go for the 6 Nobles, you're going to have to level those up earlier. You're just not going to see them later. So, it is one of those builds that is really handy that it doesn't have to get the early game stuff. And they have really good tank options, so it's pretty strong against a lot of the other physical damage builds out there. So, if, enemies are going things like Rangers, Gunslingers, Assassins, stuff like that, you're going to have a pretty good setup, especially in the late game, because you've got Sejuani, Volibear, Braum. If you want to run him, Cho'Gath is really great. If you have something like a Cho'Gath Volibear front line, that's extremely difficult for the enemy to crack through, especially if you're going to be stunning everybody with the Glacials. Lysandra can even kind of semi-tank. She can be on one of your flanks if you're sitting in a corner, because she's not going to get surrounded and blown up so fast that she doesn't get to ult a lot of the time. So even if you have somebody on you in the corner, like an assassin gets on you, a lot of times you're still going to be able to get off your ult unless they're like hyper-fed, which means you're going to be able to buy more time and survive. And they're pretty good at peeling off. Like, this build's pretty good at peeling off a lot of those melee frontliners, especially like assassins as well, because Kennen's ult does a ton of damage, to a lot of people that are pretty close range. Lysandra, same thing. She can save herself. She can do a lot of damage. So it's pretty good. It's a pretty good tank line. Better than most builds, other than like something that's going to, like maybe an all Yordle build might be a little tankier because of their dodge, or maybe the Nobles, if you get the full Noble thing, like their 100 armor and healing is going to be very tanky, but overall, pretty good. They have really good itemization, too. I think that you use the spatula better than anybody, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but spatula is awesome. I mean, Force of Nature is good on everybody, so, you always have that. But Frozen Mallet is actually a very, very big deal. It's one of the only major trees that is so modular and can help out so much. Like, Knights are okay, usually don't, like, go for Knights, though. At least a lot of people don't. Demons are almost never happening. Maybe sometimes Blade Master with certain, like, fringe builds can be useful. Assassins can be good in some circumstances to get it. Sorcerers can be decent sometimes. But because of just how modular Frozen is that we just talked about before, I think that it's so good on them. It's like, okay, if you're going like some kind of split between Glacials and Wilds, which we'll talk about in a second, but you just need that 4th Glacial, you can do it. It's very common to need the 6th Glacial, because you either don't have a Nivea or you don't want to run Braum and you do have a Nivea, and so you can just get a Glacial to get that 6 bonus there. So because Glacials are so modular and it's so powerful when you level that up to the 4 and the 6th sort of threshold, then that can be really handy. And of course, something like Runan's Hurricane is going to be really strong too. Now, I don't know if this works with on hits. It's in the normal League of Legends, it does. I don't know if it does in this one. But that could be pretty good on someone like Ashe if it has a chance to stun multiple targets. I don't think it does right offhand, but nevertheless, it's always good to hit some extra people and get some extra damage. So you have 3 different good options you can do with Spatula. You can do Hurricane, Frozen Mallet, or Force of Nature. So that means that you're really, really good with Spatulas, and because you can lost streak so well and recover later on so well, because the comp is really, really powerful, then that means you're going to have a really high probability of picking up some Spatulas in the first carousel, first couple of carousels. So that's really good. You're not as reliant on recurve bows. There are a lot of builds out there where you really, really need a recurve bow. So if you're trying to build something where, you know, you really need to build around like a Draven or an Ashe or not an Ashe, like a Draven, a Vayne, a Lucian, a Tristana. Like a lot of these builds are going to be relying on 80 carries to kind of take you through at the end. And you really, really need those recurve bows because you're going to need Gensus, you're going to need rapid fire cannons, a lot of people like Sword of the Divine. So recurve bow is still the strongest item in the game, I think, or the strongest baseline item in the game, even for Glacials. But you're not as reliant as you are with other builds. Use rods really, really well. So, you know, Death Cap is amazing on brand specifically, but it's still pretty good on things like Cannon and Anivia as well. Ludens, I think Ludens might be bugged. I'm not sure if they fixed that or not, but once they get that fixed, that's going to be really strong. And then you can use Gensu's pretty well also. And then something like Morellonomicon is going to be really good on brand as well because it does really nice sort of AoE damage whenever your flame is bouncing around to everybody. So pretty good options there as well with the rod. So great itemization. And it's just really underplayed, finally. You know, there's less contest for brand. Sometimes people pick him up, but he's really only used with Glacials, I think, Elementalist, because... Hey, thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. Not sure if that blocks out. Okay, yeah. That does actually block out my camera for a second. But really, like, it's only going to be Glacials that are fighting for brand because most of the time... I mean, some people get a standalone brand because he is very strong. But the Elementalists have 2 Glacials in it with Lysandra and Anivia. So it's really hard to get to those 3 Glacial or those 3 Elementalists for the bonus Elemental unless you are going for Glacial. So I think personally I see a lot less competition for brand than I do for Gnar and a Aurelian Soul. I mean, Wild Dragons is by far the most documented, like, heavily successful build, especially in the preseason or in the pre-beta. It did get nerfed. It's still pretty good. It's still very popular. So he's just something that not as many people fight for. A lot of people, honestly, in the carousel just go for items, even on the second carousel. And I think if there's a tier 4 champion that is a cornerstone of your build, it's better to get that champion. So if you're going for wilds, to get something like Gnar, or if you're going for like this build, Glacial Elementals, then you want to go for the brand. But anyways, I just feel like there's a lot less competition at tier 4 for that, so you can actually snag a brand fairly early, oftentimes. And you don't have to compete for a lot of these popular level 3 strats that we mentioned before. There are so many people that try to get tier 3. Kha'Zix is very popular to try to get tier 3. People try to get to like tier 3 Warwick or Nidalee early. People try to get to tier 3 pretty much almost like Darius, Garen, and you don't have to play that game. You don't have to re-roll. You don't have to, you know, look around at people and say, well, there's already 10 Kha'Zixes on the map, so I guess I've got like a way less chance to get that champion. Because remember, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, like there are only so many of each type of champion in the game. So if everyone else is getting that strategy, if everyone else is doing the same thing, you're going to have a much lower probability to get it yourself. So the fact that not a lot of people are competing for glacial stuff in mini games, at least not right now, means that you're going to have a higher probability of getting some of your key pieces. Also, many strats use physical damage, and a lot of the core items that people get are going to have armor on them. So that means that a lot of comps are really weak to magic damage. So if you're thinking about things like assassins, gunslingers, imperials, nobles, even to an extent like shapeshifters. Now, if they have Aurelian Soul, you know, they're going to do a lot of magic damage as well, but if they don't have a high level soul, a lot of their damage is going to be physical, right? If you think about, I think that Shyvana might be magic damage on her ult once she transforms. But either way, it's pretty light on the magic damage most of the time. And so a lot of people just don't invest in Negatron, and Negatron is like the weakest item, I think. You know, the only thing that's good out of it, like Bloodthirster's okay. Zephyr can be all right. You sort of get that if you just, you know, have a Negatron and a Giant's Belt laying around and you just need to make something. But for the most part, these items suck. I mean, Hush is bad. Like, most people that know what they're doing are not going to get Hush. They're not going to get Swordbreaker. This is okay if you really want to hard counter magic comps, but once again, a lot of these top builds don't have a lot of magic. Like, Assassins pretty much have no magic. You know, Gunslingers and Imperials usually try to carry the game off of 80 carries. Same thing with Nobles. And so just a lot of people are not going to be getting Dragon's Claw unless they see that you're a big threat. They think you're going to be a problem. But if you're doing kind of the early loss build, the early int build, like I'm talking about, people are not going to see you as a threat. They're just going to think you're a noob that doesn't know what's going on. So it's unlikely that people are going to get this Dragon's Claw. Now, you can win around this as well because, you know, if you just stun lock them at the end of the game, if their carry on the back line has this Dragon's Claw, it's like, yeah, okay, you're not going to blow them up immediately with Brand or whatever. But it doesn't matter what their resistance is. You can just beat them down with basic attacks when they're going to be chain stunned for like 10 seconds at the end of the game. So that's just another perk, is that a lot of people, a lot of builds don't go very heavy on the magic damage. This build does. There are a ton of AoE magic damage champions that you have. So I think that's another way to just exploit the meta right now, that a lot of people just aren't going to be ready for it. They're going to be passing on the Negatron cloaks. And so that's just something to consider. Like, nobody's going to go for Negatron Cloak if they can help it at all in the carousel. Like, everybody's going to be going for recurve bows and probably BF swords, and then, like, maybe rods and tears, but almost everyone passes on Negatron. Okay, so let's talk about some of these key key champions here that you want, and then we'll move on a little bit faster. I will try to make sure this guide's under an hour, but I want to be thorough and really explain stuff and not give you the all caps. Just so, once again, if you're watching this in the future and stuff changes, you know, maybe some of the stats change around some of these items or some of the champions, you'll at least understand the core principles behind this build and be able to adjust to help it fit into your own game, into your own playstyle. Okay, so the key pieces, pretty much in order that you're going to want to find, are Brand, Lysandra, Kennen, Ashe, Sejuani, and Volibear. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is Brand up there as this key piece with the Glacial build? The thing is, Glacials by themselves, like just the Glacials, don't have very much damage. They have a lot of CC, but they don't have a lot of damage. So they do fit very well with other damage builds. Like we mentioned, you can go Hyper Carry with Ashe if you have a Varus, or you can go Elementals with Brand. I think that's typically the best one. So you're going to have the Glacials. You're going to have at least a 4 bonus most of the time. That's not that hard to get to. But getting the damage is a problem, so you need to find something that's like a hyper carry that can work with this build. And it's usually going to be Brand. So what's up with Brand? Why is Brand so strong? Why do I think he's such a great carry? Well, first of all, the Elementalists are very, very strong in and of themselves. They summon up a Daisy, an Elemental that Ivern summons in the base game. And I don't know how much HP that thing, or like the exact stats on it. I haven't been able to find that. I don't think it's on the wiki yet. But that thing is a beast. I know it has north of 1,000 health, like for sure. It might even be closer to 1,500 health. I don't know its armor and magic resist, but the thing can really tank some stuff. It is powerful. So it's basically giving you an extra champion. Like, it's at least as good as most tier 1s by the time you're able to summon it later on in the game. So it's basically like you get a free force of nature that summons an extra frontline tank. So really, really powerful bonus. And then they also get, the elementalists get more magic damage, or they get more mana per basic attack. So they're going to be able to charge up, get to their ultimate faster, and that means that they scale really hard with attack speed, and specifically Spear of Sojin, after you do one ult, because you're gaining like even more ult every single time, or even more mana every single time, then you sack it up super, super fast. Now, I don't know how it's coded. Basic attacks grant twice as much mana. So if you have a Spear of Sojin, each basic attack returns 15% of your mana, right? Basic attacks restore 15%. So I think that 15% is doubled. Once again, you know, the game is very new. It's in beta. There's not a lot of information out there. But based on anecdotally what I've seen, it looks like it restores double because he's an elementalist and it gives you double mana. So, the sorcerers also have the same bonus. So, like an Aurelian Soul has this too, and that's why Shojin is so popular on Aurelian Soul with the Wild Dragons build. Is I think it's the same thing, that it powers up really quickly. So it's not uncommon if you have like a Spear of Sojin and like another recurve bow item on brand to see him like ult again while his first ult is still going off. It's like, okay, ult, hit, it's bouncing around, hit, ult, hit, ult. It's just like insane. It's like constant, just nonstop bounces. So it's very powerful. It might also be bugged. I feel like sometimes it bounces more than 4 times, but I don't know for sure. It's either way, it's really, really strong. So he's a centerpiece to getting to Daisy because he's the tier 4 piece that you need. The Lysandra is usually pretty easy to get. She's tier 2. Kennen's fairly easy to get. Not a lot of people fight for Kennen in the carousel if you really need him. And he's tier 3, so it's likely you're going to be able to pick him up at some point. His stats also, it only costs 100 mana to ult. That's really important. For a tier 4 champion, that is a really low amount, especially when his ult is as powerful as it is. Aurelian Soul is 125 mana. So this is about 20% faster than Aurelian Soul. He has pretty high DPS, so 36 on his basic attacks is not bad for a mage. He has decent health for a mage, 700, pretty strong. And this ultimate is insane. It does so much damage. It's 800 damage. 800 damage. Virtually guaranteed off of just a level 1 brand. So even if they are spread out a little bit, it can still bounce around. And even if there are only 2 champions there, it can bounce between them and do a lot of damage. So it still does 800 versus if you hit someone with Aurelian Soul, his baseline damage, I believe, is 250. So if you hit 2 people with that, then it's only going to do 500. Now, if you hit 4 people with the soul, it's going to do more damage at level 1, right? So if they're all perfectly lined up and soul hits a bunch of them, yeah, he might do more damage. So I think he's at least on par with soul as far as hard carries. And especially because his mana comes online faster, and I think he has a better secondaries than soul does. And he's less contested. People don't fight over brand as much as they do soul a lot of times. So very, very strong champion, really powerful ult, great scaling on the ult. So it does 1200 damage. It bounces 4 times if you get a level 2, and you're never going to get a level 3. It'd be extremely rare to get a level 3. So don't even worry about that one. I mean, that would do 2400 damage, but it's just not going to happen. And he's also has the demon passive. Now, this is not always relevant, but if you have a Varus, it certainly chips in. So if you throw Varus into the mix, then you have Varus plus Ashe for the Ranger bonus. Then you have the brand bonus as well. Now, they did just buff Varus, or they buffed demons in general, to where now you have a 40% chance to trigger on your attacks. So that's really good for draining out their front line, right? So if they have a front line, you know, Garen or Darius or Sejuani, or just something else that can have a pretty threatening ultimate, then this is just a nice little cherry on top that you can do to sort of suppress them, to slow them down a little bit more so that they don't get to ult. So yeah, I think that brand's fantastic. Lysandra, similarly, she has the Elementalist bonus, so she's going to be charging up faster. Now, you have to get to 150 mana with her, and she's much squishier. She's got only 450 health, so she's not going to be as strong. as Brand is in general, but she's still pretty good. She's got the Glacial bonus. She's got the Elemental. Does 150 damage. It can spread out and hit a whole bunch of different people. Now, one nice thing about her is if you kind of have her sort of in the middle of your pack, kind of near your back line, then if there's an assassin that goes back on her, then she's okay at dealing with assassins because she can freeze herself and force them to switch targets and do a little bit of extra damage. So she's nice. She's versatile. You can pick her up early. She's only tier 2, so pretty good champion there. Kinnan is another one, and he's the final Elementalist, so you definitely want to get the Elementals online ASAP because you basically get the free champion that we talked about before with Daisy. Kinnan also requires 150 mana to go off. He has pretty good DPS, 45 base, and then don't forget if he's your only ninja, which he will be, that you're using with this build, he gets 40% extra attack damage, so that means that he's really doing closer to, like, I don't know, 60-something, like low 60s damage, which is really, really nice for a tier 3 champion that's especially at level 1. Now, he's pretty good. He does pretty high base damage as well, up to 350 per person that you hit on this. And it stuns him for 1.5 seconds. So, once again, nice AoE. You're noticing a theme here, I hope. You've got the Brand AoE damage, Lysandra AoE magic damage, Kinnan AoE magic damage. So you have a ton of AoE magic damage, especially that can melt front lines. So that's really going to help your sort of your meatballs up front just clean up and then get over there and stun lock the back line. A lot of the times is what ends up happening. So Kinnan going to be pretty strong as well. Ninja, Elementalist, Yordle, not usually relevant with this build. If you do go for like a Gnar like Wild Splash that we'll talk about in a second, you can maybe grab a Vagar or something or a Poppy later and get the 3 Yordles, but it's really rare. But the Ninja Elemental is enough to make him really relevant. Excuse me. Ashe is going to be the final one that we'll mention here. Sort of in depth. And Ashe is really strong for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's only 100 mana to use her ult, and her ult is extremely strong. Remember that even a level 1 Ashe, and usually you can get her to level 2, she's only a tier 3. It stuns them for 1 second per hex. And she has really, really long range. She has 990 range. I think. Does it have a range on here? Okay, so now they're telling you in hexes. It used to be like a certain like thing, but now they've changed it over to hexes, which I think is easier to understand. 4 hex range on her attacks. That's really far. If you get rapid fire cannon on her, which is a common build, you can basically hit across the entire map. So that means you can very safely put her on the far back line and still hit people at almost all ranges. So really nice range on her. And if you throw this arrow 4 hexes, that's a 4-second stun. That is, you know, probably 5 more auto attacks that you get off on them while they're stunned. And if you have a 40, or even if you only have a 30% chance to stun off of 4 Glacials, you know, you're going to get 4 or 5 hits at them. So you're going to have, in theory, like 120 to 150% chance to get that stun. So at least if you add up everything. So yeah, a very high probability you're going to be able to chain stun people, especially at the very end if they have that super hyper carry on the back line. You know, they just have that Aurelian Soul that's going off, or, you know, the Tristana that's like 3 items going off or whatever. You can hit them with the stun. Now, I think it'll still stun even if they are immune to magic damage, if it is something like an Aurelian Soul or a Shyvana. So she's just very good at chain stunning people. And she plays really well kind of in the mid-game if you get something like a Varus, because they can both get the Ranger buff, which potentially can give them double attack speed for 3 seconds. So, once again, very nice if you have a recurve bow on her with Ranger. Really good potential backup carry. If you don't get Brand, then she would be your carry, and you could just find something else to throw in there. We'll talk about some of the options right now that you can do with that. Then Sejuani and Volibear are pretty nice additions, depending on what else you have to help you get to that 4 bonus. Now, other options that you can do, obviously, if you see an Anivia, a Tier 5 Anivia, you want to pick her up with this build. Don't count on her. You know, Tier 5s are really rare. But, you know, if you get her, obviously, she's good. She is an Elemental, so you can replace Kinnan if you need to fit her in there. And, obviously, she's Glacial as well. So, you know, that can help you get to that 5 bonus. If you want to throw a Braum in there, Braum's usually the missing piece because he's one of the weaker pieces. Or if you don't want to run Braum and you have a Glacial Mallet or something like that, Frozen Mallet, then you can turn your brand or something into a Glacial to get the 6 bonus. So she's going to be someone that you almost always want to pick up if you can see her, if you get access to her. Varus is another one that works surprisingly well with this, and you don't have to keep him. He's just tier 2. It's pretty easy to pick him up later. They did just buff him as well. So his arrow does 400 damage at level 1, 600 damage at level 2, which is nice. And he it's only 75 mana to charge it up. So he's pretty solid, has good attack speed at 0.7 as well, nice DPS. I think he has good range as well. Yeah, he's got 4 range, so same as Ashe. So pretty long range champion, and has nice synergy with a couple of different things in the build. You've got Rangers with Ashe, or you have Demons with Brand. So, and a lot of times you can get both. So very, very nice singleton piece you can put in there. You can sub him out later if you need the 4 bonus with Glacials or the 6 bonus, or if you're going for like the Wild Splash and you're trying to get the Shapeshifters or something to go with it. You need to throw in a Gnar or a Shyvana or something. You can substitute him out. But in general, he's a pretty good, very simple to pick up early game champion. That can be really handy. So, and he's not that highly contested, I don't think. A lot of people don't go Demons or Rangers. So usually you can pick him up. Cho'Gath is another one who's awesome late game. Cho is very strong in and of himself because he starts off with like 1100 health. So he has more health than most level 2 champions. So you can actually pretty comfortably sub him in, even for like a tier 2 Darius or a tier 2 Garen. He's still going to have more health than they do. Now, he has a little bit less armor than they do, but, you know, his ultimate more than makes up for. Obviously, if you get into tier 2, he's just going to have an obscene amount of health. But he's a pretty good substitute, even if he's level 1, like I said, for a Garen, for a Darius, if you want to switch over. Now, he does have the Brawler buff as well, which is really nice. You can throw that with the Volibear, or you can even pair that with the Warwick if you're going for kind of the Wilds opener. So he fits really well with some other common builds here. And just the theme of Cho'Gath works really well, too. He's got a really nice stun. It's huge. It's like a 3-hex stun. It's just, like, ridiculous. It hits half of the map, knocks people up, and stuns them for 2 seconds. So really, really nice to chain that together with your glacial stuns. It does take him a while to charge that up at 150, but I've definitely seen many rounds completely determined by that ultimate. It is very, very strong. So I think he's handy. Void is not going to be relevant for this. You do have to sometimes fight for Cho if someone's going like Void Assassins or Void Brawlers or something like that. Because Rek'Sai is also a Void Brawler. So sometimes there's some competition for Cho out there, but overall, if you can pick him up, he's pretty good. You don't have to have him, but it's nice. And then Braum, finally, like I said, I don't like Braum that much, but if you compare him together with Leona, then that can be really good, especially if it's coming down to the wire. It's like the last, 3 people or something, and a couple of them are going heavy physical damage builds. They're going gunslingers or assassins or something like that. Getting that extra damage block is nice off of the Leona passive, and it's important to note that that's not considered armor as well. If we look at Guardian, right? So, actually, it is armor. Never mind. I lied. It is armor. So, it is going to be reduced by Void Assassins. It's the Knight bonus, and the Knight bonus that is considered damage reduction and not armor. So, it doesn't get reduced by Void. But, anyways, he's okay. If you throw him together with Leona, then they do provide some armor. Leona herself is all right. It takes her a while to charge up her ult, and it usually only stuns one person. Now, it stuns them for a long time. 5-second stun on one person is very nice, but a lot of times it can just come too late in a fight. Like, it can be over before she even gets to 150, because she has really low attack speed at 0.55, so her mana is going to charge up very slowly. She doesn't have a ton of health for someone who's tier 4. It's okay at 750, but remember, Cho'Gath's like 1100. So I'm not a huge fan of her, but sometimes it can work. If you turn her into a Glacial with Frozen Mallet and you throw a Braum in there and get your 6 Glacial bonus, and you've got a really powerful brand or something, you just need like a meat shield up front, then she can work out. Okay, so your early options with your key pieces, Nidalee plus Warwick is usually a really solid go-to. Warwick is a very good brawler. Nidalee provides great sort of backline support. She obviously has a nice ranged attack. She's going to get really nice attack speed with Warwick and Nidalee. They're going to get the wild bonus, so they're going to start attacking faster. And then once she transforms into a cougar, then that's really, really strong. It does a lot of damage. Fun fact, if you put a rapid fire cannon on her, then she still gets her huge range damage even when she's in cat form. So she still gets double damage of what her spear is even when she goes into cat form. So you'll see her just like sitting there swiping, like hitting across the whole map with her cat form. They'll probably fix that in the future, but right now it's pretty funny and pretty strong, so you don't have to put yourself out of position when she transforms. So in order to go into melee. So that's a pretty good opener. It does allow you to transition into Volibear in the mid to late game if you want to, because he also counts as a brawler, or if you haven't found a volley and you just need to throw on an extra meat shield up front, you can throw down a Cho'Gath, and that can be helpful. You can also pivot into Wild Dragon, so you don't have to fully commit to Glacials early. Remember, Glacials you don't really start getting some of those key pieces until tier 3, right? Until you start picking up like maybe an Ashe, get some Lissandras at tier 2. So you don't have to fully commit to Glacials. So you can start off with Nidalee and Warwick and just say, okay, I might go Wild Dragons, or I might go for Glacial Elementalists. And then, you get your Nidalee, you get your Warwick, maybe you see a Kennen or something like that. You can just pick him up and he's a good standalone, assassin in the mid game. And then you can just kind of wait around and see, what do you get, right? Are you getting a couple of Shyvanas early? Are you getting a couple of Ashes early? And most importantly, who is your tier 4 that you see first? Usually, it's not too late to switch. So if you see a Gnar, if you have access to a Gnar in the carousel, then you can actually go for Wild Dragons. All right, I'm going to go Wild Dragons. Or if you see a Brand in the carousel, you can say, okay, I'm going to go Glacials. And it's no problem. You can still keep the Nidalee and Warwick for a really long time as your front line and just surround them with, Volibear, Cho'Gath, stuff like that. That can work out fine. I've even had one game where I was able to get wild shapeshifters plus 4 Glacials. Now, I had to have a mallet for this, but you can do Gnar, Nid, and Shyvana sort of in the mid game, and then you can switch up and go for, what was the build? I had it written down. I actually had Aurelian Soul in there too, which was pretty crazy. I had Nidalee, Gnar, Shyvana, Soul, Brand, Anivia, Cho, Lissandra, and Sejuani. So it was like super late game, and I had a frozen mallet. But I just had like the entire left side of the screen lit up with bonuses. But yeah, so it's just like super, super flexible. So if you want to go for these shapeshifters, you already have the Nid from earlier. Then you can just throw in, if you see the Gnar, you can grab Gnar, you can grab Shyvana if you want to, and then usually you can get a 4 bonus in there somewhere. You may not be able to fit in the Kennen Brand, but if you don't see a Brand, then you could potentially pass on that and just try to go for Glacials with some other way, right? You could just go for like maybe Volibear, Ashe, and just get like 2 Glacials to go in there, and then you could just go Wild Dragons after that. So there's a lot of different options there with Wild. There's a lot of synergies between different champions, particularly in respect to brawlers. So I think that's something that is worth considering. And then finally, if you go for a Garen Darius open, which is perfectly fine as well, then you can go Knights later on with Sej. So you can substitute out the Garen or the Darius later for Sejuani. It also gives you an Imperial option. So if you see a Draven early on and you want to go Glacials with Draven, you can do that. Just keep the Darius, get rid of the Garen, throw in a Sejuani instead so you can keep the Knight bonus, keep the Darius. That'll give you a nice physical damage backup option. So really pretty modular. These are the two kind of most powerful opening builds, I think, either Nidalee plus Warwick or Garen plus Darius. And you can do both of them early because it's all right if you lose early anyways, if you don't get multiple copies of these champions. And you can just switch out of them later because a lot of your key pieces for Glacials are going to be level 3 and up anyway. So perfectly fine. You don't have to fight for, once again, that tier 3 early champion to make your build work. You can just switch out of it, no problem later on. And then Varus is another easy one to pick up. So you can do like either one of these and then just tack in like a Varus plus an Ashe. You can either do Garen Darius up front with Varus Ashe on the back line, or you can do Nidalee Warwick up front with Varus Ashe as well. Now keep in mind, if you do manage to get kind of your 4 wild bonus, if you go for like the Nidalee Warwick, Gnar, and then you want to throw in something like an Ahri, that gives your entire team extra attack speed. So then if you throw in some Glacials later, especially if you have a mallet, you know, if you throw a mallet on someone like Gnar, and then you add in something like, you know, Volibear, I don't know, Ashe Sejuani, or something like that, then that extra attack speed means that you're going to have more chances to get your stuns as well. So just a ton of different options you can do there. But yeah, I would, you know, your plan A should be going for these champions and then kind of building around that. And then, like, these pieces can help complement depending on what you get. And then early game, you pretty much do whatever you want. But I think these are the 2 best standalone where you don't need to try to power level to tier 3 to make them work. I think that stuff like the, if you're going for, like, gunslingers, you know, you might need something like a Lucian leveled up early. Or if you're going assassins, you're going to need a Kha'Zix leveled up early, most likely. So you don't need that with these. But that's why I wouldn't recommend those openers. I would just go with these. They're good standalone, and they can fit in later on with some of the builds that you're going. Okay, in the mid game, you want to prioritize Brand over everything else. I would even get Brand over Spatula. Maybe. That's a toss-up. If you already have one Spatula and it'll give you a Force of Nature, you can risk it and not get a Brand. But I would really, really get that Brand at that second carousel if you can. Most people will not fight you for it. You should be able to be one of the early picks if you're losing properly early. And so I would definitely get it because that makes your entire team pop. Like if you have that Brand, that's your damage. That turns on elementals. That's going to give you an extra tank with Daisy. He does a ton of damage like we mentioned before. Gives you synergy with Varus. There's just so many things that Brand turns on for you. He is your damage. He is your hard carry. And he scales so well with items too because his base damage is so high. You know, anything that's like Rod of the Ages is going to be really strong, like Death Cap, Ludens, all that stuff's going to be very good on him. So I would prioritize Brand over everything if you're trying this build. You know, you can keep the wild option open. So if you have a tier 2 Nidalee or like a tier 2 Warwick and you see a Gnar, you could very heavily consider going for that Gnar and then switching off of it. So if you grabbed like maybe you grabbed a Lissandra and an Ashe early, but then you happen to have like a tier 2 Nidalee and you see a Gnar, you can just switch off of it and just sell the Ashe, you know, sell your Glacial stuff. You've got the Gnar, then pivot over to wild shapeshifters with dragons. So I think that that's a decent option as well. And I would hold your rods for the most part if you can for the Brand. So I see so many people just like combine their items and just make stupid stuff early. They'll be like, oh, I got, you know, I'm going to go for like an Ionic Spark on somebody, or I'm going to go for like a Morellonomicon and put that on, you know, my melee, my Darius or my Garen or something like that. Someone was telling me the other day that Morellonomicon on Garen's really good. It's okay. I mean, it's not like it's terrible, but I just think that so many people are just really impatient with their items and they just pile them onto their champions as fast as possible and just try to win as many rounds as they can early. And I think that you're really setting yourself back in the mid and the late game if you do that. So I would just hold on to that rod if you can early. And just see if you can get another rod for a death cap or see if you can get a recurve bow. Now, if you're really far behind, you know, if you're getting crushed and you're about to die, yeah, maybe you have to turn it into whatever. But I think at early levels, you know, levels 1 to 4, whatever, you don't have to freak out and panic and just, like, use those rods. You can hold on to it for the Brand. And don't, like, trap your rod. Don't put this on something like Darius, you know, or don't put this on, like, Ashe early. I mean, if you want to do Gensu's, I guess it's all right on Ashe, but you know, just chill. Just relax. Hold it for your carry, right? See if you can put this on Brand. If you have a tier 2 cannon, you could put it on cannon as well. Yeah, put this on one of your mages. Or if you do decide to pivot over to Wild Dragon, save it for your Aurelion Soul. But put your items on your carry as much as possible. And Brand is definitely your carry with this build. Okay, let's talk about itemization here. Oh, man, we got to go quick. So I don't want this to be longer than an hour if possible. So we're going to do like 5 minutes on items here. So I talked about a lot of this already. You want to prioritize spatula, then recurve bow, tier, rod, BF, chain vest, and belt, and the Negatron is like somewhere in the distance, you know, off in the distance. The only thing that's like pretty good with this, like I said, is like Zephyr is acceptable. It can be good in some circumstances. Bloodthirster is okay if you put it on a frontliner. You know, you put this on the Cho'Gath or, you know, your Volibear or something like that. It can be all right. But by and large, that's not going to be that great. Spatula is awesome for the reason we mentioned before. Force of Nature is OP on pretty much all comps, but Frozen Mallet is particularly really awesome with this comp because it opens the door for you to be more flexible, for you to fit shapeshifters into the build, for you to fit in things like Varus, or for you to fit in things like Cho, you know, and still have at least 4 Glacials and maybe 6 with some of these builds. So it just opens up a lot of extra flexibility with this build, I think, more than anything else. So getting that spatula is really good because it's not a total like waste of time if you don't get Force of Nature. So if you get one in your first carousel, but some troll gets it off the second carousel to deny you the Force of Nature, you still have other options. Then Hurricane's always pretty good on in most comps. So that's good. And then recurve bow is pretty much OP with everybody. You know, rapid fire cannon's great. Gensu's, static shiv. Even something like Phantom Dancer can be very, very strong on your front line because it gives you the armor and basically like dodge all critical strikes. That means you take 25% less damage from auto attacks because you're going to have a 25% chance for them to crit you. It's going to reduce 100% damage from that crit with a dodge unless they have, I think it's rapid fire. So, mitigates a lot of damage. Very, very strong. So all of these items are really good. You know, Sword of the Divine's even okay. With your build, it's not going to matter as much. This is stronger on some of those auto attack type of builds. You know, with the 80 carries being your main carry. But it's okay. But yeah, rapid fire, Gensu's, static shiv's decent. Phantom Dancer's good. So you want to be getting that recurve bow. Tier is also pretty good. Opens up Shojin, which is OP on brand. It's OP on a lot of champions. Static's good once again. Even something like Archangels, Ludens, or Frozen Heart can be really good in the right circumstances. So that is what I would prioritize most of the time. Rods are also pretty decent, but it requires you to have a brand, so you have to wait until later. But yeah, I would try to get these 3 most of the time on your early carousel. Okay, brand is the carry, so you want to try to stack as many items on the brand if you can. So Shojin, Death Cap, Rapid Fire Cannon are going to be the best things on him. So this means that like don't put these items on champions that are going to be that you're going to use later on, or like yes. So if you're like leveling up you got a Volibear or something like that, or you got a Sejuani, or you got a Lysandra. Like don't put the items on them because you want to keep them. You don't want to have to delete your Lysandra. Like early on, if you just randomly put a Rod of the Ages on Lysandra, and later on you get a brand, you don't want to have to delete that Lysandra because you want to level her up to tier 2. So if you delete her, that means you're going to have to find another Lysandra, and it's going to delay your evolution to level 2. So if you're going to put these items on champions, put them on stuff that you're going to delete later. So you can put stuff on, you know, Garen, or you can put stuff on Darius if you want to, because you're probably going to delete them later and switch over into another build. But if it's something that you think is going to be permanent, then that you really want to level up to tier 2 and keep for your final build, don't put items on them, or don't put items on them unless you intend for that item to be the final destination for that place. So I would just say in general, just be patient with your items. It's okay to lose early with this build. In fact, it's probably preferable to lose early with this build. We'll talk about that here in just a second, experience versus rerolls. But you know, just be patient. You don't have to put the rod early. Just let it sit there. It's fine. So don't feel pressured. This is not an early game build. This is for a mid to late game winning the game. Okay, so, you know, an early Phantom Dancer, Frozen Heart, or Zeke's can also be good in the early game on your tanks if you need it. And once again, you can take off the PD off of the Warwick early if you want to and put it on your Cho'Gath or your Sejuani or something like that later if you want to. Not a problem. Ashe can be a really strong carry if you have rapid fire, especially because that means she can stand further back and fire, which means she's going to fire her arrow from further away, which means it's going to just stun lock them for years. I mean, you can like literally, if you hit someone from like 6 hexes away and you have a level 2 Ash, that is a 9-second stun. 9-second stun if you hit someone across the map, like cross map with an arrow. You hit the enemy 80 carry with an arrow. So rapid fire is very, very good on Ash. And if you have a Varus especially, you could go for an Ash carry. So I think Brand is typically the better carry, but Ash can be a really good carry. If you have rapid fire plus something like Ginsu's on her, then that can be really, really good because you're going to get all that extra attack speed off of the Ranger bonus. So Ash could be a pretty good carry as well. And then remember, Force of Nature is the best. It's great if you have a lost streak early because you're probably going to have first pick at the second carousel, which means if there's any spatula there, there's a really good chance that you're going to get it, unless the other guy who's really low gets it. But so spatula is a good option. And then mallet's really good, as we mentioned before. It opens up a lot of different doors for you. Okay, well, we're past an hour, so we might as well go to like an hour 15 and go a little more in depth here. Why not? So experience versus reroll strat. So remember, you're playing this for mid to late game. It's super important that you keep that in mind. We've mentioned this before. You see so many people rushing like tier 3 champions. It's a waste with this strategy, okay? You do not have to have your tier 3 Lissandra. Like, you don't have to reroll for that. You don't have to have, you know, a tier 3 Kha'Zix for this, okay? So keep in mind that your HP does not matter early. It does not matter. You're not going to take much damage. If you lose fights early, you're barely taking any damage because they're not going to have many champions. They're going to have like 4 champions early on. It's unlikely they're going to completely blow you out 4-0. Like, it's likely if you lose, they're going to have like maybe 2 or 3 champions left. You're going to take like 15 HP in damage, maybe 10 to 15. That's not a big deal. That's fine. Okay? So think about it this way. You're using your HP. You're basically converting that over to gold. That's the most important thing to remember. And I'm going to have an entire beginner's guide for this, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. But think about it as trading HP for gold for an extra resource. If you've ever played any other game, I'm thinking like Magic the Gathering, but, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of games where this is a concept. Like, being able to use HP for a resource like that is extremely strong in that game, right? Like, so in Magic the Gathering, using HP for mana or using HP to draw cards or whatever is really strong. So it's no different here. Or if you played World of Warcraft or something like that, like the Warlock's ability. I'm just thinking Burning Crusade with Warlocks. Just how OP that was, that you could life tap and use your HP to get mana back so that in really long fights, like while the mages are like struggling for their mana and they're having to manage their mana, you can just go all out and just chuck those shadow bolts like a freaking machine gun. No problem, right? So it's the same thing in here. You want to be able to trade your HP for a resource if you can. And this is one of the best strategies for early losses because a lot of your power comes in the mid game. So don't forget that in this game, if you go on a win streak or a loss streak, you get extra gold. So if you can go on a loss streak, if you can start losing 4 or 5 games in a row, 4 or 5 matches in a row there, rounds, I guess I should call them, then you'll start getting an extra 2 or 3 gold every single time that you lose. So the game with that then is you want to try to lose, but lose by as little as possible. So ideally, you're not getting fully blown out every single time and losing huge chunks of HP, but you're just taking very minor losses. The amount of HP that you lose is equal to the amount of champions that they have on the map and left on the map after you lose, and like the rank of that champion in terms of tier and like what level that champion is. So if you lose to, you know, like 6 level 3 like tier 5 champions, it'll probably one-shot you on your HP just about. But if you lose to like 1 like tier 2 level 1 champion, you're barely going to lose any HP. I don't know the exact formula for it offhand, but it's very, very little. Okay? So with this strategy, a lot of times you want to try to lose early, but like barely lose. And the reason that I say like losing early is good with this strategy is, number one, you can get the spatula that we mentioned before. You'll save gold because you don't have to reroll. That's the other thing is, this build is, you don't have a lot of good early powerhouse tier 1 champions with this, right? You're not trying to get your Kha'Zixes. You're not trying to level up pikes for power. You know, you're not trying to level up Garens or Dariuses or things like that, right? Other people will, though. So you're going to face a lot of people that are going to have, they're going to come at you with like an early tier 3 champion, or they're going to have like 3 tier 2 champions or whatever, and you're just going to lose. Because you're not specializing in champions that are going to be able to fight that. And a lot of people, once again, are just going to combine their items and just make whatever they can. So they're going to be stronger than you, but they're going to have potentially wasted those items for later. So you're going to have people coming at you with like cursed blades or, red buff or sword breaker and all this. And they're going to beat you early, but they're not going to have like the powerhouse items on the powerhouse carry later on if they do that. So you have to be patient with this build, okay? It's okay to lose. It's good to lose early with this build most of the time. Because one of the worst things you can do in this game is go 50-50. So if you're just like winning some fights and losing some fights and you never go on a streak, then you're losing out on a lot of bonus gold. So you either want to lose hard and like start getting into the bonus, the +2, the +3 gold on your loss streak, and get early like carousel picks, so you have a really good chance of getting that brand or getting that second spatula. Or you want to win really hard, get a bunch of extra gold, get some rerolls, and snowball off of that. That's not this strategy that we're talking about today, but that is one that some people will use to win. But you want to lose, and just remember that the stuff that matters in this build, a lot of it is going to be at tier 4, okay? So do not freak out, in the early game if you're not getting to level up some stuff that you want to level up. It's fine, okay? The thing that matters most is brand. You have to get brand, okay? At some point before you die, you have to get brand. But it's okay if you get him and you only have like 20 HP left. That's fine. Because once you have brand, once you have this whole setup, this build, and you're sitting there on 50 gold, and all these other people that have used all these rerolls, they only have like 10 or 20 gold left, it doesn't matter if they have 100 HP. Watch my last viewers night that we did. So that would have been like the July 1st or July 30th. It's always saved on the channel. I think it was the second game of that stream. I went down to 6 HP early and hit that threshold in my build where we had the brand. We had the team assembled, right? We had the 4 Glacials plus the Elementals. We had the squad. And we came back and we won against Toos on the stream, and he probably was pulling his hair out and like throwing his keyboard through the window or whatever, because I'm pretty sure we got to 6 Glacials on that build, because he had a really strong, I think he was doing Void Assassins early. He had 100 HP. He was on a win streak up until the very end there, and I had 6 HP and came back, and I won like 8 rounds in a row, 8 or 9 rounds in a row against everybody, and finished him off at the end. So don't be afraid to go to low HP. Once you get the squad, once you kind of turn that corner, there's no going back. They're not going to beat you anymore, okay? Unless, like, most of the time, those people that get ahead early, it's because they get those tier 3 units, and they're not going to have the money and the power to keep up with you later. Because when they're sitting there with their cute little tier 3, their tier 3 Veins and their tier 3 Kazakhs, you're going to come rolling up with like your tier 2 brand and your tier 2 Sejuani and your tier 2 Anivia and stuff like that, and you're just going to smoke them most of the time. So don't worry about that. Play for the tier 4 units. Don't re-roll on champions until you get to level 7. So as far as the leveling goes, for people that don't know that out there, there's a chart here on the wiki, and they just changed the stats like a few days ago, and they might change them again. But if you look at the stats here, your probability of getting a level 4 champion doesn't even come online really, like realistically, until level 6. So these people that power level early, they're never going to see their tier 4s, right? So you have to be up to tier 6, which is the point where it's the 18 XP to get there. Okay? So this is where you really want to start buying XP. So I like to buy XP when you're going for level 5, because the Krugs will come up when you are 4 XP short of level 5, and there will be like a little warning that shows up. Maybe you should buy some XP here so you can fight these things. I like buying it there. It does level you up to level 5, which gives you some chance of getting a tier 4. It starts to give you much more chance to get the tier 3, so you can start getting your Ashes and your Cannons. So I like to buy XP there. But then I'll wait like another 4 or 5 rounds, depending on what my HP is, to get to like maybe 10 XP here. Towards level 6, and then you should be over 50 gold by that point, So the goal there is to have at least 60 HP by the time you are 10 XP towards level 6. Then you buy your 8 XP. That'll power you up to 7, and that's where you really start going. Because now you're going to have, or I guess you'll be level 6 then. Now you're going to have a 10% chance of getting to tier 4. And if you can, I would wait a couple more rounds until you get over, like, around, like, 75 to 80 gold. And then you power level your way up one more, up to level 7, right? So that's the 30 XP one. And then that's where it really starts taking off. That's where you start getting the 15% chance. And then there you can start thinking, you know, should I be re-rolling here? How much do I really need? If you don't have a single brand yet, you might start thinking about, okay, I need to start re-rolling. I need to get to brand. But if you do have a brand, if you're still winning your rounds or you're not losing that hard, you can greed out and wait a bit longer. You know, if you can wait until you get back to 80 XP after like, or 80 gold after like 3 more rounds, then you can afford to power level up to level 8. So that's the one that costs 46. And that's going to give you a 20% for tier 4, and you're going to start potentially seeing some tier 5s. So every time you roll, you're going to have about a 1 in 4 chance of seeing a tier 5. So you're going to have 5 shots of 5% each to start seeing them. That could be good if you really want that Anivia to finish off your piece there. And then after that, you know, if you're still winning, if you still have like 40 or 50 health, or you're at least not losing that badly, you can wait even longer. And then if you're kind of satisfied with your build, if you have most of your pieces and a lot of stuff's already tier 2, but you just have a couple more tier 2s you might want, maybe just wait and then just bust your bank to go for the level 9. So, you know, you're not going to have any money left after that, but you don't need that much money after that because you're going to be like max level and you're only going to be using it for rerolls. So then once you're down at like, you know, 20 gold or whatever, after you max it out, it's not going to matter anymore. It's like, okay, well, every round I'm going to get 4 rerolls and I'm max level. So there's a good chance I'm going to be able to finish off my build. So it just kind of depends on how it's going. If you're below like 25 health though, you're going to have to call an audible. So if you're below 25 health, if you're just getting run over, you might have to break your bank, which is go below 50 gold in order to get to level 8. So you just kind of have to see like just how badly do you need Gnar. If you're getting completely obliterated, or not Gnar, brand. If you're getting completely obliterated and you just don't have that brand, but if you had it, it would really make your team comp pop. You might just have to spend 20 gold rerolling. But I would only do that if you're minimum level 7 and really you want to try to hold off into your level 8 to do that. And you want to stay over 50 gold as much as possible. A lot of people, you know, tell me on the stream, they're like, hey, you can't save any more than 50. So, like, who cares? Why are you saving when you have 60? The reason is so you can still level up with your experience and you can stay above 50. So, unless your health is dropping down below, like, you know, 30, maybe 25, you really don't have to be in a rush to panic. Especially if you're actually beating a couple of people or you're barely losing, it's fine. You can just have patience and stay above 50. But if you do start to lose, you know, you might need to start freaking out and re-rolling. But it just most of it depends on brand. If you have brand, you can make most other stuff work. Like, you don't need to hyper re-roll to try to get that third Volibear, right? You don't need to hyper re-roll to try to get the third Sejuani. Like, it's nice, but you don't need that necessarily. Like, it might be better if you just are a higher level and you can just throw another body out there, right? So, you know, you can figure that out in general, but I would not re-roll for the rank 3 units under any circumstances. I mean, very, very rarely. If you're just getting thrown a lot of Nidalees early or a lot of Warwicks early, especially, like, maybe if no one else is going Warwicks for some reason, and like your first few levels, you get like 7 Warwicks. But in general, I wouldn't do it. So, you know, just keep in mind these probabilities. And this is why a lot of those other builds start falling off too. They can't level up fast or they're not going to be able to get their tier 1. So if they're going for a tier 3 Kha'Zix or a tier 3 Vayne or whatever, they have to blow a lot of rerolls early. Because once they get to level 4, then they're only going to have a 50% chance of getting a tier 1 champion per roll. So that's going to start dropping off dramatically late game. But even into the late game, you'll still have a pretty decent chance, you know, if you're level 8 of getting a tier 3, even a tier 2, like you'll have an okay chance, you know, as you start going through. It's just you're going to have a super low chance to get a tier 1. So, anyways, that's what I would do with leveling. The last couple of things, positioning, just for one final minute here. The main things you want to watch out for are just be careful. Like, usually you want to pack it into a corner because you have nice long-range champions like Ashe. You know, even like Kennen and Brand have decent range. So you just want to pack it in with a lot of tanks on your front line. That's going to protect you against assassins coming out on you. And yeah, so that's the main thing in there is just, it stops a lot of people from getting to you. But if they have a lot of AoE magic damage, you know, if they're running like Aurelion Sol or Cho'Gath or Gnar, you need to be very careful because if they wombo combo and just like blow you up, that could be a problem. So you might want to spread out, just form a front line and just try to get in their face with your Glacials ASAP. If they're doing something like that and they don't have assassins, get in their face and then just kind of have sort of your back line spread out a little bit more. You know, spread out your Cho'Gath, or not your Cho'Gath, spread out your Ashe, spread out your Brand, stuff like that, so that they won't be able to completely obliterate you with a Gnar or an Aurelion Sol. If you are versus assassins, try to line up on the same side that they're on and hang out in the corner. The main reason you want to stay on the same side is that your backline won't get pulled away. So they don't have a picture of the map, at least not one that I could find for you. But basically, like how assassins end up beating you is if you set up in the opposite corner that they're in, then your front line will move forward early on, and then your back line will also move forward so that they can try to get in a range to attack something, and that's going to allow the assassins to jump on your back line. So if you stay on the same side of the map they are, so if they're setting up on the right side and you set up on the right side of the map, I guess it's mirrored, I think. So if they set up on their left, you set up on your right, then your units are not going to have to travel as far. So your tanks can just immediately start fighting their tanks. And that means that your Ashe is also going to be in range to hit them. And so she's not going to have to move, like your Brand's not going to have to move. And so that corner, that edge of the map is going to be able to protect you a lot better from assassins because you're not going to have to move. So that's something to keep track of. Or if they're still getting to you, you can actually put like your Ashe and your Brand in the middle and surround them with tanks. So like you could make a front line, like a 3 or 4 tank front line, depending on how many tanks they have and how many assassins they have. And then you can deliberately put like your Ashe and your Brand in the middle of the pack. And then on the back line, you could put something like a Volibear or a Cho'Gath or something like that. Just put them alone on your back. And then all the assassins are going to jump back and try to attack the Volibear or whatever. So that's just a little trick there. Kind of a 5-head next move is you actually put a couple of tanks all the way on your back line against assassins so that they are like a magnet. So the assassins jump to them and they don't jump to your real threats. So, or at least it's more likely that they're not going to jump to your real threats. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching. I know this is kind of a longer guide. I intended it to be under an hour, but there's a lot of stuff that I just want to talk about here and cover. And just really set you up for success, even if it's in the future, even if they nerf a couple of these things or change them around. Hopefully the concepts are still useful for you to win a lot of games out there. So that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. If you would like a guide yourself, just email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com. You can set that up. Remember, it's just $30. I'll do a guide over any topic of your choice. If you are a channel member, then it's just $25. If you want to become a channel member, then there's a join button right next to the subscribe button on the YouTube channel now. It's just $5 a month. Cancel anytime, sign up anytime. It just helps support the channel. It's basically a Twitch sub that YouTube has now. And so if you want to do a guide, it's pretty much free because you get a $5 discount on the guide, and it just costs $5 to get a month on the recurring payments. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thanks. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.